Okay, students, welcome to this next week, week 6. We are on our second week of the Civil Rights Project. Last week, you should have picked your topic, as well as found one source for your topic. So if you remember, this is where we're putting all of our research. We are not creating the presentation yet. We're just creating the research. We're putting it all together. We're evaluating that research. We're summarizing that research. And then you're putting it all on this document here. So last time, you should have watched this video here. And in that video, it kind of showed you around Utah Online Library, and you're supposed to find one source from there. So this week, you're going to find two different sources, okay? So think of this. We have 2 classes this week. Within those 2 classes, you want to find 2 different sources, so a source per class. And the first source you're going to find this week is going to be another Utah Online Library source or another academic database source, right? So last time, I showed you how to go around Utah Online Library. There's the link there. It's just right on that assignment page. But I wanted to show you guys a different database called JSTOR. JSTOR is kind of like the king of databases. I think it's most people's favorite database. It's a database you're going to come across a lot in college. You'll log in. The login and password are just right here. It's Harriman HS, and then library. So you would just put in, Harriman HS, library, and then log in. Harriman pays for this, the use of JSTOR, and so that's really nice of them. And so then we can all use JSTOR, okay? So then from there, you would just search, your civil rights, whatever, right? Your civil rights movement. So I could type in civil rights, and then probably want to be more specific than that, because as you can see here, about more than 500,000 results came up, and so you want to be more specific, but you get the idea. And then you kind of just go through and see if any of these sources answer any of these questions that you have listed, under these numbers, right? So who are the leaders, etc. Okay, so you're trying to find a source that answers another question. So you're going to find one more source from an academic database. It can be Utah Online Library, or it can be JSTOR. I would highly recommend using JSTOR, just getting familiar with it, because again, for those of you who are planning on seeking higher education, it's a really good place to go. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about mostly with you guys today is the second source that you're going to find. Okay, so the second source you're going to find is going to be from Google, I call this a popular search engine. However, most of us nowadays just use Google. Google's kind of won the battle of major search engines. Back when I was growing up, there was like a battle. I mean, Google was always like the best one. But like Yahoo tried to get into this battle, Bing, and those things still exist, but most people use Google. So we'll just use Google here, okay? So we're going to find a source through Google, but I wanted to make sure you guys understood is that like one of the main objectives of this project is we are trying to find out how to find reliable sources, right? We all know how to Google, right? We all know how to put something into a search bar on Google and seeing what pops up. However, I would contend that a lot of those things that come up on Google aren't necessarily accurate, and there's a reason for that. Let me show you really quick. So when I type in something into Google, so say I type in the civil rights movement, as you can see here, it has 1 billion results come up, right? And like just in terms of number, I would say the vast majority of those results that pop up are incorrect, okay? So because of that, you need to be able to sift through all of those different results to find the ones that are accurate, and that can be really difficult. So you need to learn how to limit your sources, and you also need to learn how to look for those things that kind of indicate whether a source is correct. So with that in mind, I created this checklist. Now this checklist is really important in my class. In fact, there will be a quiz on it next week, and so if I were you, I would make sure I would take note with either like a piece of paper or Google Doc, exactly what you're looking for, right? Because I'm going to be testing you guys on this checklist because I find it important for you guys to remember it, okay? So when I'm looking at a source, there's certain things that I'm looking for right from the get-go that will tell me whether this source is something I can trust or not. So the very first thing I look for with sources is just the purpose behind the source. Like, why does that source exist? Okay, is it there to educate me? Is it there to make me buy something, to entertain me, to promote something, right? Are they trying to sell me something? Things like that. Is this based on facts or opinion or propaganda? Who's the intended audience, etc. Okay, so the really cool thing that maybe you didn't know before is that each source kind of inherently in its domain name is telling you what it's about. Now let me show you what I mean, right? So I looked up the civil rights movement, and here is this source from civilrights.com. Now, the thing about .com, so whenever you have this dot whatever, that kind of tells you the motivation behind it, right? .com stands for commercial. And so theoretically, as you can see here, actually, as this pops up, what the .com source is trying to get is it's trying to get money. If we're being cynical, most .com is there just to make a lot of money. And I would say that is not the most like holistic, altruistic sort of motive when it comes to academic sourcing. Okay. However, so like if I have for me, when I see your guys' sources, if I see a .com source, I'm going to be looking at that .com source to make sure that it's reliable. And there's a big chance that it's not. There's a chance that it is, but there's also a chance that it's not. Okay. So you want to be very careful if you are using a .com source. Okay. You want to make sure that it's reliable. So there's other things in that checklist, but again, .com can be a little bit non-reliable. Okay. So I look at .com basically. If there's tiers, like tier 1 is the most you can trust, tier 2 is the second most, and tier 3 is the one I wouldn't trust. I'd put .com on tier 2. Right? It's something that could be trustworthy, but also could be not trustworthy. If I'm using a .com source, essentially, I'm only using that source if I'm familiar with that website already. Does that make sense? So I'm not using some sort of website that I've never heard of before if it's .com. Okay? That's just a rule of thumb. Okay? So again, if you're using .com, I will be looking I will scrutinize that source. And the whole point again is to have reliable sources. And if I, the teacher, deem that it's not reliable, you will get 0 points for that entire source, which is again the main point of the assignment. Okay, so that's .com. Other domain names is .edu, which stands for education. Most .edu is like universities, schools, and so for the most part, you could trust a .edu source. Now that's not the only thing. Like just because it's .edu doesn't mean that it's trustworthy. Because there could be some shady schools out there, or just somebody who's able to make their source .edu. So you want to, again, still look for more, but I would say .edu is like tier 1, right? So tier 1, most trustworthy, I would trust .edu. Another domain name is .gov, which stands for government. Theoretically, hypothetically, we can trust our government, and so that would be tier 1, right? I can trust a .gov source. .edu, .gov, I would put tier 1. .com, I put tier 2. And I would say tier 3, the one that would go there would be .org, which stands for organization. .org sources are usually biased. And so I would not trust a .org source. Do not cite .org unless you come talk to me. Though a source like right from the top of my head that I would trust that's .org is like pbs.org. But there's not very many .org that I would trust because they're biased sources. Okay, so very first thing I look for is purpose. I look at those domain names. Again, you can gain a lot of knowledge and understanding about a website's purpose behind their domain name. I also look for authority. What I mean by that is there an author identifiable? Is their background identifiable? Do they cite sources? Is that publication current? Most like academic sources you would want published within the last 10 years. So we're going to use that as rule of thumb. Don't find sources that are more than 10 years old because we learn a lot, even about these civil rights movements. Within the last 10 years, there's new scholarship that unearths new information, and so you don't want outdated information. So it's really essential. This is really important to understand is that a source is inherently more reliable if you can identify the author, right? When somebody puts their name on something, they're staking their reputation on it. So make sure that there's an author identifiable. Make sure that if there's an author identifiable, that does not mean that it's reliable. because anybody can post anything on the internet. So you want to look and see if they have like credentials, right? What's their background? Do they cite that? So again, on the civil rights movement timeline here, it says history.com editors. I don't really know who the editors are. It looks like there's a link. I can click on the link and see what that comes up with. And this will tell me what the editors means. But then they name some people, right? So like there's some authority behind that article. So it becomes inherently more reliable. But so you want to make sure that there is some sort of editor, things like that. And as you can see here, they're also kind of citing their sources in a roundabout way by having these different links. So this source is looking more and more reliable. I know it's .com, but it's a .com that I know, right? History.com is something I've heard of before. I've watched documentaries from history.com. Inherently more reliable. Okay. So that's authority. Next thing I look for, and this is what I call kind of the aesthetic of a website. You're judging a book by its cover. Does this website look professionally made? Or does it look like the links don't work, or it was like shoddy made? Usually if somebody's willing to put money into something, right? So like if something looks professional, that probably means it is professional, which means they hired somebody to make their website. And again, we really just, if somebody's willing to put money into something, it becomes inherently more reliable. I know that sounds weird, but I would say this, like rule of thumb is that if it looks nice, there's a chance it's reliable. Doesn't mean that it is, but there's a chance. But if it doesn't look nice, I would say there's a high chance that it is not reliable, right? Because legitimate scholars, legitimate historians, legitimate teachers, things like that will not be, will put some pride into their work and will want to make a professionally made website. So again, looking at this source here, you know, it looks pretty well made. It has like a video, it has a timeline, it has, you know, a lot of different things. It has all these different sort of suggestions. It looks reliable to me. Okay. So I would probably say that's good aesthetic. And then again, when you look at this stuff, you just want to make sure that it's covering all the information, and that the source is completely finished, completely done, completely updated. So those are the different things in the checklist. I'm looking for coverage, reliability, does it look nice, authority, is there an author, do they cite sources, is there an author's background? If there's not an author's background, I need to like Google that author, and then, you know, the purpose behind that source. So if all of those things kind of check off my list, then I can kind of say that the source is credible. So looking at this source again, yeah, it's history. It's .com, but it's history, and I know history, right? And then is there an author? Yeah, there's these editors here. It doesn't have a specific name, but it explains on that link, this is who these editors are. And then looking at the aesthetic of the website, it looks pretty nice. It looks like it was professionally made. I can like click on links and see what pops up. This day in history or whatever, right? I can just like look and kind of check throughout the website and see how legitimate it looks. It looks really nice. And so I would, again, if I were me, I would probably say this source is good. It's a good source. Okay. So that is the checklist today. So this week you're going to find one source from Utah Online Library or JSTOR, and then another source from a popular search engine, so most likely Google. And you're going to go through this checklist. And then when you find a source that answers that question, one of those questions, you know, you're going to do the same process. You're going to summarize that source. You're then going to tell me, you're going to cite that source in MLA format. And then you're going to tell me how you plan on using that source, and why is it credible? You know, why should I trust this as a teacher, and you should trust this as a student? So that is the gist. One note to make is that you'll still need to cite this in MLA, and most of these sites that you find will not have an MLA citation button. So you'll need to use a citation machine or learn how to cite things. Now I'll be putting a link on this web page here that will take you to MLA, take you to the citation machine that you can use. Okay, but anyways, that is what we're doing for this week. Please let me know if you have any questions. Remember, if your grade is not where it needs to be in terms of not coming, then you need to come, or you'll be marked absent. But anyways, that's all I have for you. Good luck this week, and if you have questions, again, feel free to come in, email me, and let's talk. Okay, bye.